So now, Mark, as you remember, I got the incredible woodshed over there, which was your favorite place when you were out here years ago. We do have a shot of Mark at the woodshed going, wow, this is awesome. But something that's new since you were last here is all this concrete. So what I did was I poured a slab of concrete that runs from the woodshed into the new wing of the shop. That way I can roll different pieces of wood in here. It also allows me to do a little bit of outdoor cooking, so to speak. Now you're probably wondering what I got going on in this thing over here. Times have gotten a little bit lean. We're having to cut back. We're having to kind of like, cut some corners here. So we're making a wood stew in here. Now basically what's going on with this is a method for boiling wood. And I think 3 or 4 years ago when you were out here, we were working on that great big sculpture and we had to boil it to basically kind of stabilize the wood. Well, I told you that I'm working on the Hawaiian market right now. So I'm also turning some vessel blanks out of curly koa. And this is one that I've just roughed out. And so this is going to be the top of a vessel. So I turned it on my lathe, and what I was noticing was that it was starting to end check on me. So what I decided to do was, at first I did the alcohol treatment, where I soaked it in alcohol for 24 hours. Then I took it out of the alcohol and let it drip dry. But this piece is having some stability problems, so there were checks that were opening up there. So what I did was I quickly wet it with more water. The water is going to reestablish the moisture content. And then what I did was I boiled it. So I took this and basically had this completely submerged in this pot for a couple of hours. The heat source is just a propane tank. Down here I got a little camp stove that's used for basically, just outdoor cooking, I guess. And I've got my can elevated up on some bricks. That way it's just a little bit safer. Okay, so basically what I do is I put the lid on and then I'll duct tape this thing shut. So I'll just take some duct tape and I'll wrap it all the way around here to seal this. Now, you might think that that's dangerous. We've got heat, we've got water, we've got steam. Everything is duct taped shut. But guess what? The duct tape acts as sort of a low-tech kind of a safety release valve. So once this starts to boil, and you can hear it boil, you'll hear it starting to boil on the outside of this can. So you can hear it boiling, and also once it starts to get to the point where it's generating enough of a rolling boil, you'll see some steam escaping from the tape. So you'll see the tape start to open up, and you'll just see a little fissure of steam coming out. So basically boil it for a couple of hours. And then with this one, I didn't want to take any chances. So rather than doing the paper bag method, after I boiled it, I waxed it. So I basically coated the whole thing thoroughly with some wax. And now it looks fine. It looks stable. After I boiled it, I did leave it in the pot overnight so I could go all the way back down to cool water, and then took it out. And at that point, it was pretty well waterlogged. But then I just let it drip dry for about an hour or so, and then just thoroughly coated this thing inside and out with the greenwood sealer. Basically, this is probably about a $150 chunk of curly koa, believe it or not. So, and this came off of a $450 block. I don't want to take any chances. So putting the wax on there makes it good and stable. Also, I'm going to be on the road here in the next day or so, so I won't have time to babysit this thing. And by putting the wax on there, that way I can come back and it should be in good shape. So let's take a look at the art gallery over there. This is another new addition. We put some overhangs on here, which I thought were really cool. And of course, being David Marks, we had to do them with a patina. So copper has gotten very expensive, as you know, so these are soldered together from some scrap pieces of copper. But by the time I put the patina on there, everything kind of blended together and came out looking pretty cool. Wanted to put a couple of plants out front, so I got some copper pipe, which is just bored some holes through some pieces of redwood and bolted those onto the front. And that way I have a trellis so that these plants can climb up the front of the shop there. So Mark, this is a piece that you probably recognize when you were out here working with me years ago. This was a project that I had you help me on. And this was, now, I can't remember, were you here when we did the veneering as well?
No, I actually was just working on the...
On the cores? Okay. All right, so I don't know if you've seen this since I veneered it, maybe.
I've seen it because I think I was...
Oh,
That's right.
AWFS.
And
Okay.
talking to the guys at the William Ing School.
Aha. Okay. All right. So this is one that this is also a basically a torsion box. It's a what I call a hollow vessel form. You know, a series of ribs inside, hexagonal ribs that are getting smaller and smaller, and then the nose cones at the end. Laminated with sheets of 1/8 inch thick Italian bending plywood, and then basically just block planed one piece at a time. So once I had one skin laid on there, I just take a block plane and shave that down and get it flush with the ribs, and then glue on the adjacent piece, and then block plane that one down, and then essentially did the same thing with the veneer on this. But what's special about this one is this really exotic wood. This is called Avzalia. It comes from Laos, which is near Cambodia, and it's just got some incredible grain patterns to it. Just this really three-dimensional kind of, well, just a quilted, veining, reptilian-like pattern. Now, just as an exercise, well, not just as an exercise, but just to show people what else was possible, I took the exact same form and then gilded this one in copper. But by gilding this in copper and then doing a patina on it, you get an entirely different look. So now there's some wonderful, you know, kind of like a blue-green, salty formation that's encrusted on the surface there. And then just some of the dark colors coming through the background. You can see the difference if you put the two side by side. You know, basically two really elegant forms, what I would say reminiscent of a boat shape, but completely different finishes on there. So another lesson in how the finish really transforms the surface of an object. This is a friend of mine from San Diego, Mike Jakowski. Mike likes to turn these large vessel style shapes. This is a piece that we collaborated on, so I don't know if you can see it, but I've gilded the inside with copper leaf. So that's all copper leaf and patinaed on the inside. I don't know if that's showing up or not. But Mike's an excellent hollow vessel turner, does some beautiful work. Has won a lot of awards down there in San Diego. This is one that I'm still working on. This is a collaboration with Gorst. I have a hard time pronouncing his last name. I think it's Gorst Duplessis from New Orleans. Poor Gorst lost his roof in this last hurricane. But Gorst does some amazing engine turning work. And these are done on a, I guess, a duplication of a Holtzapfel lathe. And I've gold leafed the inside, but I'm still going to put on another layer of gold leaf on this one. This is a friend of mine from Canada, Michael Hasseluk, who's an amazing turner. And Michael was out here a couple of years ago teaching some classes. He showed people how to turn a sphere, and then he came back and burned these very interesting shapes on it. Then he turned this spoon, and this was really cool. With his spoon, he made a jam chuck. So he made a jam chuck. Well, first he started out by turning the spoon between centers. So he turned it between centers, got that rounded shape here. Then he made a jam chuck and rotated this 90 degrees so that the handle was spinning this way, and that allowed him access to hollow out the inside. Then he took it one step further and wet the wood with some water, put it into a microwave, and then bent the handle. So, you know, very clever, you know, very innovative and ingenious work there. You know, Michael's a brilliant craftsman. He's one of the Canadian artists that won one of the Sadie Bronfman Awards, along with Michael Fortune and Grit Laskin, two other Canadians that have won the Sadie Bronfman Award. Here's another one of Michael Hasseluk's famous forms. This is actually a box. Hold your ears as I open this thing up. Oh, yeah, it didn't squeak this time. What Michael does is he hollow turns these. Michael likes to use a hook tool, which he refers to as a gouge on a stick. And it's a fairly aggressive tool. You want to turn that cutting edge up to about 7 o'clock, maybe 8 o'clock, but you don't want to have it horizontal. And he can use that to scoop and cut out the insides. Then what he'll do is he'll take this to the bandsaw and cut this into various shapes, glue these back together at odd angles. And then, you know, he's got basically a mortise and tenon joint, so this thing will fit back together. And you can put that back together in all kinds of different positions. You know, very sort of a sculptural, creative piece there. Here's another piece by Mike Jakowski, just a small hollow vessel here. This one you can probably see the finish that I did on the inside. I don't know if you can get the light in there, but I did some gilding and patination on the inside of that one. Very difficult to get your hands in there. Probably one of my latest pieces that I'm most proud of is this hollow vessel over here. I've been doing a lot of turning, and I was invited to the SWAT Symposium in Texas, and then invited again to the big Utah Wood Turning Symposium last summer, and received probably one of my best compliments of the year from Alan Batty, who is one of my mentors from England. Alan's just a phenomenal turner. He's, I think, probably 70 years old at this point. But he came up to me at the show and said that this piece caught his eye right away and was one of his favorite pieces in the instant gallery. So that pretty much made my year. You know, I was really stoked with that. This is turned out of a California buckeye burl on the top. And then there's a mortise and tenon joint connecting this to poplar on the bottom. And then the poplar is basically something that gives me a surface that I can paint and gild and do my patinas on, which is my trademark finish. And then on the very top, I joined together a rim out of snakewood. So this is all segmented out of snakewood, which is glued to a collar of ebony with urea resin glue, and also let into the top of the buckeye burl with a mortise and tenon joint. Turn a couple of beads down here with a tool that I learned about from Alan Batty, which is the point tool. And the point tool is just a really great tool for doing detailing work like beadings and stuff. Kind of works similar to a skew, but it's a lot safer than the skew. And if you can get it, high-speed steel 1/4 inch round stock works best. And basically the cutting geometries are whatever the diameter of the steel, you want to grind the bevels 1.5 times the diameter of the steel. So if the steel is 1/4 inch in diameter, grind those bevels back 3/8 of an inch long. And this is, of course, sitting on a stand from Woodworks. You remember that old show?
Yes.
So that was one where I was showing people how to, do some sliding dovetails on the legs. So these are all a sliding dovetail coming up to the bottom. And then all this was hand carved, just laid out a spiral pattern with some masking tape, and came back with a pattern maker's rasp, and did the top basically the hard way. I should have turned it on the lathe, but back then they didn't want me to do any shows on wood turning. They said there wasn't enough woodworkers that had lathes, so shows you what they knew. So anyway, we did this one basically with the bandsaw and the router, and made that one work. Then this desk here, another project from Woodworks. Picture frame also from Woodworks, one that I gilded with silver and did some patinas on. Found this drawing over in New Zealand, which I think the colors just were meant to be. Yeah, great match on that one. This is one of my bronze benches. This is all cast bronze. This thing weighs about 80 pounds, so it's a pretty heavy piece there. And stopped making these. They just got to be a little bit too labor intensive, but there are some beautiful pieces there. The stand I made on Woodworks, and the sycamore bowl with the ebony rim, and then the serving tray down here, also with the double bevel marquetry technique, which we teach here at our school. And let's see, we got this cabinet that I think you've seen, and some other pieces in here. This is a cool piece. This is something that I bought from a friend of mine named Anthony Harris. I think he's in Kansas. This is a box. This thing is actually threaded. He does hand-chased threads. So you can open this up. This is his card. It's a wooden nickel. And how cool is that, man? Hand-cut threads on the inside. All out of African blackwood, and just, exquisite detail work and craftsmanship. So this is the upstairs portion of the gallery. We have some more pieces from Woodworks here. This is the bench that I made on the show, or one of the benches. This is out of a slab of walnut. And then all the boxes down here are basically pieces that I made these out of plywood, and then I laminated those with sheet copper and did a blue-green patina on that. This is, the lamp, or, one of the lamps I made on the show out of koa. And, I've got the lampshade off right now because I chipped some of the wood on the foot moving it, so I got to repair that thing. Another table that we made on the show here with some inlay on the top out of Ziricote and Pernambuco. And then a shelf over here. And, whoa, a rail over here. This is a guy that works for me part-time, Derek Moore. Did an awesome job on this railing, just a really beautiful job. I needed something to prevent people from falling down the stairs. And when we built this, we intended it at first to be a storage space. And then after that, you know, it needed to become a gallery. So I wanted to make this out of some really nice woods. And of course, I got a ton of wood out there. So I used some walnut and some curly maple. And then the walnut on the top wasn't quite thick enough, so we had to add on to it. And I thought, you know, that Ziricote would look quite nice. And what the hell? Laminated some on either end there. And then came back and did some carving on the end, so it's got a nice grip there. And yeah, just worked out quite nice. This I thought you'd get a kick out of, being another drummer, is the trap set. So this is my old set of Gretsch there. And of course you want me to play, don't you?
David Marks, a man of many talents and someone I'm lucky to call a friend. His craftsmanship and creativity goes well beyond what we got to see on Woodworks. From turnings to sculptures to unique furniture, David constantly reminds us that if you can dream it, you can build it. Now, if you're in the Northern California area, you owe it to yourself to take a class, or at the very least, catch him while he's on the road. David even has a few DVDs now, including a new one on sharpening scrapers. You can pick this up at his website at djmarks.com.
That's probably about all your ears can tolerate.
I'm David Marks, okay, I got it.
One of the most important upgrades, we now have a bathroom over there. And we're back.
We need to make another MDF.
Wait a minute. Wait, my voice was. Okay. The cutoff from the lid. Sounds like we got a helicopter coming over there. So that's basically what keeps me busy these days, is teaching classes, playing drums, and working on my art pieces. And having fun.